This is just now that the recording has started, just want to state that the meeting minutes from April 2022 were approved unanimously. And we have gone through the agenda item number 1, which is call to order, the statement regarding COVID, and roll call. On from number 2 now, we adopted the meeting minutes. Number 3, this is our time to talk about the issues that we would like to talk about, any ideas for action, reviewing equity topics, etc. I have not really brought anything today. I still feel like we are more or less in a holding pattern. So I don't really have a whole lot to bring to the group or to discuss. I did actually compile some resources, just some things I've come across over the past couple of months related to other jurisdictions trying to assess equity and get a handle on housing segregation, discrimination, equity, all of which are related. So maybe I can throw some of those links in the chat. I just kind of brought them forward for folks to review between now and our next full commission meeting, really just to get a better idea of some potential things that could be done as we have suggested the full commission do to better assess equity, particularly as it relates to housing. So that's where I'm at today, y'all. What's on y'all's minds, and what, if anything, do we feel like we want or need to do today?
I think we are in a holding pattern. I don't remember exactly why, but as I remember, it could be because we're waiting on an action by the commission or potentially another subcommittee. Joe got something there, huh?
Yeah, we made the recommendation. If you look at the April minutes, the recommendation is in there about a housing equity study that we presented to the commission a few months ago now, and they have for what, that was April, so 3 months now, chosen not to address with an agenda item. So we've been in a holding pattern because we had an ask and they haven't taken it up. So I mean, I think there's other stuff we could talk about. I'd be interested in what everybody thought of Larice Walker's visit to the commission, the city's chief equity officer, last month. But yeah, I think that's why we gosh, I don't know if it feels frustrating to anybody else that the commission has really shifted the work to the subcommittees, and then the subcommittees say, hey, okay, we got something to talk about here, and then it gets really tabled, pushed off for months at a time, just driving me up a wall.
So Joe, I have been trying to decide how to respectfully bring up in the commission that if we don't start to make some action moves and stop getting presented to death, that I'm finding my time spent in the commission not the way I wanted it to be. So I've been grappling with how to bring that up in a respectful way, because I just don't want to see any more presentations. And frankly, I see those presentations in several other meetings I attend, so they're not even all that unique. So I'm frustrated, and I share your frustration in our issue not being brought up. And I appreciate the politics that are going on. It's not that I don't understand that. It's just been so long that we've been attending these meetings with little input from the actual commission. So I don't know, those are just my thoughts, and I felt like this was a safe space to say it.
Yeah, I'd made a recommendation for Lori, a presentation, but it was kind of the response I got was, well, we really don't need this, and I actually gave in to that response, because after thinking it through, I was like, well, maybe it wasn't that important, but I thought maybe some of the information, and I don't remember, like I said, I don't remember what it was, but I thought maybe it would be something worthwhile knowing. But I was like, all right, then let's move forward, whatever it is, no more presentation, let's keep going.
Yeah, I 100% am with you, Lori and Mike. I have said it at the meetings, like, stop giving us so many presentations. I've also talked to Jim Toffel directly and was like, dude, I mean, we send us the stuff beforehand and we can review it if there's stuff to be reviewed. But like, I just, the idea of taking 30 minutes to talk about how the Section 8 program has improved, I mean, that is wonderful. Kudos to them. But like, I just don't think that that's really a good use of time. And yeah, I just feel like we are in our subcommittees, like, I know that the low income, the affordable housing subcommittee is also doing some good work. And like, why are we even coming together as a commission, as a group? Because we're not actually talking about the issues. I don't really think that, I don't feel like that our issue has not been taken up because of politics or because of some nefarious thing going on. I just feel like it just has been missed. And I mean, is there really a difference? Maybe, maybe not. But our issue hasn't been taken up. And I just feel like, again, if we can't get on the same page about what equity even means in this community and how it's inequitable or not, I mean, we can't do any work. So, I mean, again, I feel like that's what we have uncovered as our subcommittee, brought that to the commission, and it's still just kind of floundering. So I'm 100% with you guys. So go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I think Lori hit it about our time use. I feel the same way. So yeah, I go to the affordable housing subcommittee meetings. I go to the Housing First committee meetings when they happen, and I go to the full commission meetings. I not just attend those and try to participate when I can. I watch every one of these on YouTube after the fact, and I write a monthly newsletter for about 30 people about what's happening in this commission or not happening. And I'm kind of unwilling to assess whether the neglect is benign or not, but it's definitely neglect of the issues that we're here to discuss and talk about. So whether it's a nefarious political agenda or whether it's just being put off for some other reason, it's still neglect. And it's frustrating as a use of a lot of important people's time. And I love that people show up for this. And this subcommittee is doing, I think, a better job than any other group in the CEHD, including the full commission. And I appreciate the three of you and Ernesto so much for being here and working on it. But I don't even love what the affordable housing subcommittee is necessarily doing. I think, there was a meeting a few months ago. CJ Boyd from Ward 3 showed up, and he had a couple suggestions that said, hey, these are what I'm hearing from constituents. Like, we've got a big problem with investors. Is there a way to talk about that? Can we put that on our list of things to, maybe come up with a policy around it? We advance that to the CEHD in general, and maybe we could come up with a recommendation for mayor and council to address that. Well, they did a survey of the suggestions that had come through. I even got one on the list. Mine was about maybe more community controlled housing options. And, those are really, I know public housing is a whole other thing that we're not talking about, but co-ops and community land trusts are the other ones that are, in my mind, community controlled, less commodified housing options. So that got on the list. And when it came to what the people who were on that subcommittee voted for, it was, we want to look at how to get more funding and how we can relax zoning. There weren't any specific things about zoning, but I get the idea that's a general deregulatory agenda as, let's just do this with less parking and fewer setbacks and try to do things that way. And I'm not opposed to those things in lots of situations, but like, when I've talked about inclusionary zoning, I always want to say, if we're doing that in a broad across the city policy, there are going to be consequences that are unintended, and those need to be looked at in an equity kind of fashion. And the other one is like talking about funding, and it's like, okay, how do we get more funding? Can we run a bond? Can we, is there money coming from a housing trust, state or local? I know the Congressional Subcommittee on Transit, Housing, and whatever else just put out their budget bill, and it looked like, okay, a 15% increase in housing funding, give or take. That's all good stuff and good ideas, but I also want to kind of note that if what we're focusing is on funding for LIHTC projects and Section 8, we're going back to the two things that have been failing us for years and years. And we need, I know people say, oh, we need some innovation, some thinking outside the box, I don't know if it's a revamp of public housing or whether it's better community controlled options, because all we got on housing co-ops, the conversation about that went, I'm interested in that because it's something that exists other places and has been effective in situations. And all we really got was, it's tough to lend for co-ops. Right. Not how can we make that better, but we didn't advance that conversation at all. So if we're talking about funding, everybody says we don't get enough LIHTC projects. Okay, what's the dream here? That we get 3 LIHTC projects a year that are 70 units a pop and we get 200 LIHTC units? All right. Well, I was in Housing First last month and they said, okay, we need probably 2,000 permanent supportive housing units right now. So if nobody else needs those in the next 10 years, hey, in 10 years, if we get our dream of 3 LIHTC projects every year, then we'll be there in a decade.
Well, and there's just so little too that we can control regarding LIHTC or regarding Section 8. I mean, it's federal and there's only a limited amount of money. So to your point, Joe, it's of course, we want as many LIHTC projects as possible. It's a no-brainer. So if there are some things in the way of getting more projects, then take care of it. I mean, it's a no-brainer. What do we as a commission do about that? Nothing really, I don't think. I think too, going back, Joe, to your question originally, one of your original questions, the presentation from Larice Walker, I mean, I'll be honest with you guys, it was borderline insulting. I just was like, why did you even show up? We know that you got hired to be the chief equity officer. We know that you're working on equity. What? You've got nothing else to tell us? I just was very, very unimpressed. And like I said, even less than unimpressed. So, benefit of the doubt, she's new. It's a new program. I get that, but still, considering we are one of the, I don't know all the commissions in the city of Tucson, but considering we are one that actually has equity in our name, I mean, you'd think that it would have been given a little bit more importance, but it wasn't for whatever reason. So that's just my response. I would say the other thing too, when you look at the city's priorities, we just passed a road bond for $700 billion without batting an eyelash, and that's great. Roads are crappy, I understand that, but why isn't that being done for housing? I mean, we need that kind of money, and I feel this resistance in the housing space to do much, kind of to your point, Joe. Yet when it comes to roads, it's oh, let's come up with a $700 billion bond over 10 years, get that passed and move on. Again, barely batting an eyelash. So where are our priorities as a city? I mean, they're with roads, and maybe that's about it.
It's because of the pain. I believe it's because of the pain concerns. So not enough people, is this my view. Not enough people in this city feel the pain of the other people being homeless. Not enough. You got to feel it. They use the roads, they feel the roads. I don't like this bump, but they're not forced to house someone who needs housing. That's my opinion. Back to I think her name, you say Larice Walker. Yeah, I was really curious too about her. I was I read as much about her as I could scan across real quick, and I was like, all right, let's see what happens. She came to the meeting and she said her piece, and yeah, I agree with you. I didn't understand that presentation, but I was like, okay, so the presentation was made. I got two things that I feel like I can't do anything about at various levels. And these are the two things that just jumped out at me from being on the subcommittee and the commission. Source of income protection. I just, I just feel like it's a fight, a war I'd like to wage into, but I'm not allowed to. And the other is, and maybe I'm just too aggressive in my thinking and my feelings, and I've got just a brute attitude about it, which is, if you're not going to build enough affordable housing, then we're going to take money out of the coffers and we're going to build it. End of story. Just going to be done. Get it done.
Right.
But again, I don't know how to wage into that war. I don't have any weapons.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's such a good point, Mike, because source of income protection is so obviously an equity issue, and where is it, right? I mean, it's the city council said, hey, we want I don't know, a policy or some sort of a piece of legislation that we can pass, and I know that it's complicated to come up with that, but that was 6 months ago, and there's been nary a peep about where that is. So yeah, I'm with you, Mike, and about the roads as well. I mean, I think it's just right on target. It's like most everybody drives up and down the bumpy roads, and you see them every day. But I also feel like, yeah, there's just more to it. I think too, like, there's no opposition to building new roads either, right? I mean, there's no anti-road building lobby. I mean, really. And when it comes to housing and doing, whether it's source of income protection or, government funded or sponsored affordable housing, I do think that there's I know that there's this huge gorilla that's waiting to like smash anything that we do. And that's the home building lobby, the multi-housing association. So, if we were to do anything or suggest anything, which I'm sure we would, that they don't like source of income protection, they're going to come smash that. And there's not an equivalent, I don't think, or that I know of, when it comes to talking about improving roads. I mean, some people are like, don't want government to have more money because they don't really like government, but those people didn't show up, obviously, for the road bond conversation. So.
Too, I don't know if you all saw, but yesterday HUD put out a whole bunch of money. The Biden administration is earmarking a large new amount of money for communities across the country, which is really great. And there's money in there for more vouchers, for Section 8. But the problem isn't how many vouchers we have right now. The problem is we can't get people into housing. So, right. Even if we were talking about that issue, which I realize it needs to be a much bigger issue, right? We need to build more housing. We need all of that. I read that and it's exciting. We'll apply for it as a community. I know that lots of agencies will apply for those funds, but even if we get those vouchers, we can't get people into housing. We just simply can't. There are hundreds of people sitting out there with vouchers in their hand right now that cannot get an apartment. So source of income protection, that fits into that. If we can't build tomorrow, which we all know we can't, then we have to do the stuff that we can do today. And the stuff that we can do today is somehow get landlords to work with people who have subsidies, whatever those subsidies look like. And so to Mike's point about feeling like you can't do anything, I try to focus on that piece because it's the one thing I feel like we might be able to make some progress on. Whereas I know even if we got 10 more LIHTC projects, it would be 2 years before we saw those built. And I'm not saying we don't put effort into that, right? Like that is not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is we can't wait 2 years or a year. We have people that are sitting here trying to get housed up and we can't get them housed up. And now we're going to get more vouchers as a city. So, and those vouchers are going to go to the PHA, which is the city. So, yeah, I guess the level of frustration is high in this committee. Yeah, and when I said political, I just want to say that I meant that I didn't necessarily think that our thing not being on the agenda was nefarious or anything like that, but I know that the Mayor's Commission has a political agenda to have the Mayor's Commission, right? That's what I meant. Like I want to believe that it was made for the right reasons. And I do think it was made for the right reasons, right? But it's also government and they have other agendas. They just do, right? That's just the way it is. So that's what I meant. And I want to be a part of the solution really badly. That's why I applied, right? And that's why I keep showing up until 6 o'clock at night when I'm exhausted, right? But I am losing patience.
Yeah.
For whatever that's worth.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, you got it. I to hit a couple specifics, source of income protection is like just a basic kind of tenant protection. And the chair of the CHD voted against that, wasn't even on board with that. And there hasn't been any conversation about any other tenant protections. Good cause eviction, I feel like, it's so much pushback that might be a bridge too far for us, but it's a good protection. We got emergency eviction defense at the county level, but do we have a right to counsel that really makes that something permanent that we've got to fulfill that obligation? No, we don't. We don't have right to counsel. There's stuff like that has not been discussed at all. And my point and call to the audience in the last meeting was that the creation of the CHD, we lobbied for that for, a year and a half, couple of years. And then 3 years ago, the mayor said, we're doing an anti-displacement and gentrification task force. Great. It got held up. Well, maybe we don't want it to be a task force. We have too many task forces. Can we create a gun task force? Yes, but not a housing task force. We're going to resurrect the Housing Commission, the Metropolitan Housing Commission, which hadn't met for a couple of years. And and that ended up getting transformed into the CEHD. But even the original acknowledgement that we need a task force or a group to look at displacement, gentrification, equity was 3 years ago. It's not just that we've been meeting for a year and 4 months. It's that it's been 3 years of asking for this, knowing the problem was coming. And everybody acknowledges it's a crisis now, and the patient's bleeding out on the table, and we're showing up with Band-Aids. We're not showing up to fix it. To Mike's point, the only pushback against the road bond is really, or any of those kind of, when we talk about city funding, the only pushback that any of that stuff kind of gets for roads is if it's a sales tax, because it's a regressive tax. Everybody kind of says, yeah, we want to fund that. But if we're taxing, the most at risk among us with sales tax, that maybe that's not the right funding stream for it. And people agree that they go over the roads and we need to fix the roads. We've got a lot of renters, and everybody agrees the rent is too damn high.
Right.
It's not that people aren't seeing that. I think maybe homeowners aren't seeing that because mortgages, maybe property tax goes up a little bit, but renters are feeling that, homeowners largely aren't. If you're trying to buy, sure. If you're trying to rent, absolutely. It's a crisis. If you're a homeowner that's entrenched in paying your mortgage, it's probably not.
If nothing else, you're, as a homeowner over the past 3 years, if you refinanced, your mortgage payment probably went down.
Yeah, you got a lower interest rate.
Rates were so.
Increased equity. If you're, and this is speaking directly to housing segregation because it's a wealth gap issue.
Absolutely.
Like your equity is going through the roof. And full confession, I don't want to say I saw all of it coming, but like I bought a house 5 years ago. I bought a cheap house, Barrio Centro. It needed work, it still needs work. But like I'm out here specifically arguing against what would be my best interest as a homeowner to increase values of real estate. Because it's just such a crisis. The last thing I want to say is, when we talk about, hey, we got to build more housing, I think you're right. Everybody's all on board with more LIHTC projects. If we can build in other ways, hey, that's great. If we can acquire things, we can talk about community land trusts. It's awesome. Well, what kind of boggles my mind is that the crisis we're in gets created with housing shortage. We know that the MAP dashboard 2 years ago said, actually, we have a sufficient number of units for our area. What we don't have is the number of affordable units we need. And that's getting thrown out the window because of the pandemic, and say, well, the supply and demand relationship's gone all off. Well, the census showed from 2020 to 2021 a 0.3% increase in population, about 2,000 people. I don't know how many households that's going to be, but 2,000 people. So if we're in this huge crisis, and we had enough units a couple of years ago, we haven't addressed what's going on. It hasn't been a population boom. Why are those off the market? Because of investors that don't particularly care about units being filled? Is it the growth of short-term rentals? We haven't addressed, if we're saying that we've got a market imbalance that we want to try to address with more building, why is there an imbalance? And are there opportunities to recapture those as housing units if they're not currently housing units?
Yeah, there's definitely a minority opinion out there that there is not a shortage of housing units. I mean, there is, kind of to your point, Joe, like, it's not been that long ago where there were enough units, and what has happened so now that there are not enough units. I mean, clearly something's wrong, but there are people out there that say we're actually overbuilding, and it's gonna, I don't know if I believe that, but that is a minority opinion about what's going on. I think also, we're talking about, broadly speaking, like, what can we actually do as a commission, right? I mean, I know some commissions actually do get it together and like produce a report, or, do have a product to actually produce something. But, I don't see that happening with this commission. And if that's not going to happen, and we're going to be more of a commission that is bringing forth recommendations and suggestions, kind of what we're doing, ultimately it's going to mean that this work, like, take the equity study that we keep asking for, something like that. And I think what we asked for last time is not actually, hey, commission, vote on whether or not we need an equity study. Where we came to was that, hey, let's have a conversation about this so that people understand what we're talking about on the commission, and can then make an informed decision about whether or not that's something that we want to do or not. So I think that's where we got to with that. But back to my point, if we as a commission decide, hey, let's have some sort of study, laying out the baseline of equity or not equity in Tucson, who's going to do that? It's either going to be HCD, right, which I'm sure has limited capacity. We all know that, everybody's super busy, so laying something like that on the plate of HCD is a big deal. Or it's going to be something that a consultant is going to do that we're going to have to pay for. So I guess my point is just that if this commission is going to do anything, then it's going to require capacity, whether that's with HCD or money from other places. And I don't know whether or not that's going to happen. So, I just go back to, like, what can this commission do, and what is our capacity going to be? And I think that remains to be seen, honestly.
Yeah, when I started out with the commission initially, and I don't know if I've told everybody this, but I told them in my initial application, I said, look, I just want to sit in the back of the room and at least listen. That's if nothing else, I want to do that. And then I wound up on the commission with a voting power, and I went, okay, all right, let's see what I can do. Okay, So I feel the frustration. I said that specifically because of what you said just recently, Lori. I started all the way from, I'll be in the back of the room back here. I just want to, just let me hang out, to, all right, let's see what we can do. Now I still feel, as a commission, unless we get some kind of authority and power, our direction is make recommendations and all that, which is cool if that's what the commission initially was supposed to be from the beginning, and everybody knows it and agreed to it. Okay, so we make recommendations, and then what?
Right.
I want something to happen. If it has to be the city coming out of their budget and building public housing, let's do it. Let's do it.
Yeah, and I think, Mike, your point is well taken, right? Like, okay, if we're going to produce recommendations, wonderful, but what happens with those recommendations? Do they create action? And if they don't, I mean, one, we've got to get some recommendations out because we haven't even been able to do that, right? And then two, when we make those recommendations, what happens with them? Because if they just don't really go anywhere, then, you know, what are we doing, right? I mean, we already feel like, what are we doing? But then really it'll be like,
Feel it like with Joe. I mean, when Joe was saying, I mean, I feel it too. Just history, time, news, current events. I'm like, boy, this has been going on, and not the commission, but just this issue has been going on for a long time. The pandemic, the housing crisis. You know, we can't keep talking.
Right.
The talk has got to come to an end.
Right. I would also ask, right, so the commission is what it is, and we have our charge and whatnot. Who else is doing anything about this issue? Like, what other advocacy organizations are out there that are really pushing the envelope? Because I keep telling people that when I'm talking about, you know, housing as this big picture and the housing crisis and everything, I tell people, I think that this commission is a good vehicle for the voice of the community, whether that be from organizations or people or whoever, to have their voices heard. And I do actually think that we'd have the ear of mayor and council if we choose to use it. So I am encouraging people to come and speak to the commission. Obviously it's not having much impact, but I guess I'm wondering, like, what other advocacy organizations around housing are out there that we could also bring into the fold, so to speak, that's coming to these meetings, that's engaging with this topic, and that's, you know, pushing us as commission members as well to either, you know, take action or produce recommendations. It's hard to think of anybody. I mean, I feel like a lot of our organizations are kind of in this boat where it's like, basically we're service providers, and then we see what happens with all the service we provide and how messed up everything is, and it pushes us into advocacy. But like, what are the advocacy organizations around housing, either in Tucson, Southern Arizona, or even in the state of Arizona?
Well,
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Liv.
Oh, sorry. There's the Arizona Housing Coalition, which I'm on the board of, and so is Jim, and so is Liz. And it's a statewide housing coalition. And their focus has been for many years, our focus has been for many years, the Housing Trust Fund and getting that restored. And so we have been working on that. There's some really yucky legislation trying to push its way through about camps and, you know, in Phoenix, like making a set space where folks can camp. And if they don't go to that space, then basically they're criminalized because Phoenix is seeing such an uptake in homelessness, and they're having some even bigger issues than we are in Tucson. So those have been the Arizona Housing Coalition things that we've been working on. Anything that comes up in the, you know, in the legislature, the Arizona legislature related to housing in any way, shape, or form, whether it's building or homelessness or affordable rents or things like that, that the Arizona Housing Coalition tackles. But there is overlap of us on both commissions. And the Arizona Housing Coalition grapples with how to deal with the AMA too. And I think it's a tight line that everybody's walking.
Mike, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, but I want to let Joe go. Go ahead, Joe.
When we were talking about state legislature, and you know, the bills that wind their way through. One other thing, actually, I don't know if y'all get emails from the city council. I subscribe to the emails from every ward and the mayor, so whether they're weekly or monthly, I get those. There's a consistent section of the Ward 6 newsletter that's about humanizing the homeless, except it's used as a way to humanize the homeless in a way that, well, we're humanizing them, but we don't think these people can be moved into housing. We don't think they can survive in a housing environment. So it's also a call for internment camps and policing of criminalization and policing of the homeless. And I dread that email every Monday because it infuriates and disgusts me. So that's something to push back on. The one state bill that I wanted to ask about, I'm not sure if Lori, you've heard any pushback on or anything further on this. There was one that was introduced. It was a bipartisan bill, but Chavez is the Democrat, and it was originally about effectively a statewide upzone, and it got loud feedback, and it effectively, the whole bill, I can't remember the bill number off the top of my head, but it got stricken, and it was going to create a state commission to investigate housing. And I know some of the legislators down here were talking about trying to get people on that commission. I was talking with some of the people in the Pima Area Labor Federation about whether they were active, and because they're concerned about housing issues as well. That's a working class labor issue. But I hadn't heard anything since that, and if I recall, it passed. But I wasn't sure if y'all had heard anything more about it, who was going to get on that commission, and whether that was something that could create some progress at a state level.
That rings a bell, but I haven't heard anything recently about it.
Like I said, I don't. It may turn out to be that was going to be a multi-housing driven commission and just be, part of a sclerotic state infrastructure, and not really go anywhere. And the recommendations that come out of there will be, well, we need to get more LIHTC, and we just redid our QAP, so that's great. And maybe we need more money for the housing trust fund. But as long as the legislature is as it is, that money's tough to come by. But it's at least something that transformed from a bill that was really kind of I think problematic to something that, okay, a commission that examines and talks about it. Could it be good? Sure. Could it be nothing? Yeah. But I don't know. It was on my mind when it passed, and I hadn't heard anything. So maybe in general, that's something for the CHD to keep its ear to the ground about.
Yeah, for sure. Lori, were you going to say something?
Nope. I'm just listening.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the Arizona Housing Coalition is kind of the one group that comes to mind. The coalition, I mean, we're a member of Southwest Fair Housing Council and I support their work. And I think it's a great place for like all of the actors in housing, like from all the spectrums to come together and hopefully, come up with some solutions. Because I do think that contrary to popular belief, there are a lot of areas where I think compromise could be had, or a lot of areas of overlap where, the right and the left, for lack of a better way to put it, could come together and really improve housing. So hopefully the coalition can do that. But I would say that, because it's a broad coalition, things like inclusionary zoning or, some other things that really could have an impact, that's not where those things are going to come from. So aside from the Arizona Housing Coalition, what other organizations are out there that are, maybe a little bit more of an advocacy group in terms of, some of the things we're talking about. I can't really think of any, and I've been asking around. So, but I think those kinds of groups really, if they interface, whether it's, advocacy groups or, other organizations that are, deeply involved in housing, connecting with our commission, I think could be a really big deal, and something that could really help move the ball forward for what we're talking about and what we're trying to do. So I don't know how we do that. I mean, like I said, I've been, telling people, hey, come show up to these meetings. I think there's some light here to be able to make some change. But like I said, it hasn't had much impact yet. So.
Tucson Tenants Union, I'd say. I mean, Barrio Neighborhood Coalition, we've got such limited resources and scope, but you know, we want to do what we can. Worried about rent, I think, is out of Phoenix.
Yeah.
Trying to think of like advocacy, just grassroots kind of.
Well, like, Joe, why are more people from the Barrio Neighborhood Coalition not showing up or weighing in? Are they? Because again, that's a really great example. Like, but where's the input from that group? Just as a, for instance, not to put you on the spot, but to put you on the spot.
No, go for it. Always put me on the spot. I think there's a perception among BNC that once the roster was announced for the CHD, and it really didn't include more, I think what we wanted was really neighborhood advocates when we pushed for it. Like I want 20 Mike Edmonds on this commission, which isn't, marginalizing anybody else on there. I think people with deep expertise who deals with these issues on a day-to-day basis, like you, Jay, and like you, Lori, and I know Vicky shows up and talks about the disability issues and that component of it all the time. Like, we need all those people, but I think there is really a perception that it's not, that this is going to be a commission that doesn't really that has been what it's been for the last year and a half almost.
Yeah.
So I think there's a perception that it's a waste of people from BNC's time, and I've showed up because maybe I'm the optimistic one about it. I said, if we push for this, then we should show up and say, hey, we want a voice here, even if that voice gets filtered through, my voice is here and it's going to get filtered. And sometimes I get things brought before the CHD in general. Okay. Does that make it onto a report to mayor and council? Do mayor and council hear that? Do they make a recommendation based on that? In the case of source of income protection, that was something, it was in the HASP plan. Liz Wilson brought that up at one meeting. I brought that up at one meeting. It made it into the HASP plan. So, okay, that's a piece of input, but like Mike says, is it moving anywhere? That got all the way up to the mayor and council saying, yeah, we want to do that. Let's investigate that. And that's been at the city attorney for 4, 5, 6 months, whatever. And we haven't heard anything back about that. So part of that is, okay, the sclerotic pace of government again. But why is BNC not here in force? I think it's tough to ask people for additional time commitment, and
For sure.
Scheduling this kind of stuff often in the middle of the day. I know, mayor and council meetings are at 5:30 in the evening,
Right.
and if you want to do that, you can do it for what's after work for most people. You just got to dedicate your own personal time to it. If you're having it in the middle of the day, it's very friendly for people who work in the industry.
Yeah, for sure.
Part of your job. It's not really friendly for people who aren't in the industry like me. And I have more time flexibility than most people, but that's why I get to show up. And part of the other thing is by me showing up and making a report on a monthly basis, I think a lot of people feel like they're getting an idea of what's happening here. But that's not out to the community, right? If I know somebody and know they want to get the news about that, I'll send it to them. I've had a few people ask me, hey, I heard you do that. Can you send that to me? Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't get out to the larger community. So I think, like the tenants union, do they give a damn about the CHD? I have no idea. They have
Probably not.
exactly convenient time for me, so I have no clue. But I talk to some of those people once in a while. They're mostly there's a lot of them, but the leadership's really PDI kind of people.
Well, it's such a good point, Joe. Sorry to interrupt you, but like, we could actually change the paradigm as the commission, and instead of having people present to us that we didn't ask for, we could turn around and invite people as the commission to come and talk to us, right? It's like, the tenants union. So we could send out an invitation. Please come and talk to us and tell us about what's going on. Barrio Neighborhood Coalition, please come out and tell us what's going on. I mean, maybe that's another approach. And I do feel like, I mean, I certainly understand the time constraints and all of that stuff, but it does become somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy if people dismiss the commission out of hand, and then, you know, it is what they want it to be because they didn't show up and do anything about it. But I'm often on the outside and scoff at commissions and stuff too. So I totally get that there. So, but anyway.
I do think bringing up the time thing is worth it. I brought that up. There was one very loud voice that wanted it at that time, and there were other folks that were willing to change it. And I completely agree with you, Joe, that I think it's a misnomer to think that more people will be able to attend if it's later. Because to your point, a lot of folks, I think, work in industries that are not necessarily 9 to 5, right? So I think that's worth bringing up again as a small point, and asking for a vote for it, you know, rather than, because we didn't actually vote. I brought it up and it was shot down very, very quickly. But I do think that if we aren't getting folks to show up, one way to try to see if we can do that is to change the time.
Yeah. Hey, Vicky. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, sorry I'm so late. I'm just leaving my office. I didn't want to make anybody dizzy. That's why I have my camera off.
No problem. We have just been talking, generally speaking, about kind of the state of the commission, lack of action. What else am I missing, guys? I feel like most of what we've been talking about.
Yeah, lack of action. Yeah, it's just, you know, when are we going to see something, something of something?
So let me ask y'all. It is what, 10 till 2. Obviously, we've still got some time, but we've had a lot of discussion today about kind of our frustrations and other things. You know, the last thing I think we did kind of formally, so to speak, was bring up this idea to the full commission of an equity study or something, at least talking about establishing a baseline. I just want to take our temperature right now as a group of what, if anything, do we want to formally take to the commission? I mean, obviously, I'm jotting down some notes and can give our, you know, 3 or 4 minute summary of our meeting, but I just want to take our temperature of what exactly, if anything new, do we want to take to the full commission?
Well, I'd actually like y'all's feedback on my train of thoughts on this. So I pulled up the documents, a document that identifies our 3 subcommittees. And here's how it's settling in my mind. And again, I want to hear if I'm right, if I'm wrong, if you get different thoughts, whatever. So we got the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, Permanent Supportive Housing Subcommittee, and the Housing Segregation Subcommittee. So here's how the dust settled for me, and in different slots and folders and drawers. The Affordable Housing Subcommittee, that group could be the group to focus on, if you will, getting people off the street and into shelter/housing/home. That's how I file that away. The second group, as I'll call them second tier for me, is the Permanent Supportive Housing Subcommittee. How do we keep them? How does that subcommittee, should that subcommittee be focusing on keeping people into housing so they don't lose it, or if they do lose it, they don't get to the street. There's always housing. There's always housing with the supports they need, blah, blah, blah. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And I know how this is going to sound, but I'll put it at this end. We're like the Senate. We're like the guys like, okay, the things are in place. What's fair? How do we make it so that we get more housing and more fairness and more financials and all that kind of stuff? We're kind of like the soul. I don't want to say the brain, but I guess more the soul, the morality of the commission itself. Do you all understand what I'm saying, or where my mind went with that? Nope. Okay. I think I lost a few. I
think this is just the awkwardness of Zoom. It's like we all don't want to talk at once. I'm like, I don't want to go first. I've been going first. So who's going to go first? I've got some thoughts. But Joe, go ahead. I saw your hand up.
No, if everybody wants to talk, I talk. When there's not a lot of people in a meeting, I talk a lot. If there's a bunch of people, I try to shut up and let everybody go. Lori, do you have?
I'm not sure I understood, Mike. I
That's
apologize.
okay. That's all right. No, that's fine. It's just that I was trying to think of ways that the subcommittees, our subcommittees, could maybe focus, I don't want to say laser focus, but focus on making something happen that's definable to that subcommittee without ignoring the entire housing problem, all of the housing problem.
I see.
Well,
I think we're oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Lori. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think we're trying to do that. I think we're doing a good job as a subcommittee in trying to do that by bringing forth the equity study.
I was also going to say, Mike, I think I would view it as switched. I think that, but I'm not sure about this, but 100%. But I would think that the affordable housing subcommittee is the one that's trying to get more affordable housing online and to reduce barriers that are preventing affordable housing from being built. And I think the Housing First subcommittee, or whatever it's called, is the one that's dealing more with homelessness, getting people off the streets and keeping people housed. So I think you're right on target. I just think that the way that you put it with the wrong committee, you know what I'm saying? And then
Okay.
I think you're right. I think also though and I think you're right about our committee. And I think the thing that's important about what we're doing is it's the Commission for Equitable Housing and Development. I mean, equitable is the first piece of the puzzle. And that's frankly the piece that I think is the most difficult to understand. And it's the thing that has been least defined, which goes back to the whole thing of like, hey, we need some, and I keep calling it a study. I don't mean for that to be exactly what it is necessarily, but we need some sort of study that is saying, okay, here's the baseline of how we understand housing in Tucson and how fairly it is being allocated and to who it's being allocated to, right? Whether that's homeownership, renting, where people are living, based on income, based on race, based on gender, based on familial status, all of those things. So, I feel like the piece of the puzzle for us is actually making the commission what it's supposed to be about. Because I think you can continue to build affordable housing and still miss a lot of the equity issues related to housing. Because you can have affordable housing built out in areas where there are no services, there's no schools nearby, no doctor's offices, no access to food. So,
and I agree with you. That's where I was thinking about for us. Yeah.
Probably not. So anyway, that's kind of my take on what you were going for. And I'm interested to know, to your point, Mike, what the affordable housing subcommittee is going to bring to the table, because I know they've been working through like a list and putting stuff together kind of, as we have, but I don't know. I'm kind of surprised that they haven't brought anything forward to this, honestly.
Yeah. I'm just trying to get the three legs of this stool to support what we're trying to support.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just in my mind, I'm just trying to go, okay, they're going to do this and they're going to do that. We're going to do this. Okay. Team, break, go,
Yeah, I think first Jay has the kind of the vision of it the way I did, that especially with the name of one of our subcommittees changing from permanent supportive housing to Housing First, that one is really the one about dealing with homelessness, getting people into housing, keeping them in that, the pipeline, the continuum of housing, where you get them into housing, and then you get them into subsidized housing, and probably the conversion out of that into eventually maybe unsubsidized if possible, and that's why it's broader than permanent supportive housing, and that the affordable housing subcommittee really should be the housing affordability subcommittee.
Right.
That doesn't just deal with capital A affordable housing, that deals with affordability issues and what do we need to build? What can we acquire? What's the funding needed to do it? How are we getting that? And one of my concerns about things like source of income and tenant protections is that they don't, I mean, does that fit into what people coming from homelessness need to get and stay into housing? Yes. Does it fit into what people need as far as being able to get affordable housing and stay in housing? Yeah, if it's not affordable, you're going to get evicted. You got a problem. And if we're talking about housing segregation, Jay hit it right, that all the policies that come from all the other subcommittees need to have a desegregative component. And that's something that we can add. That's something we can bring. We can bring that equity focus. And when I talk about tenant protections, of course, who's disproportionately affected by evictions? That is something that contributes to and can create housing segregation as well. So my frustration with tenant protections is we can define these three subcommittees, and I don't know where it fits, but it fits in all of them, and that means nobody talks about it.
And that's okay too. I'm okay. I can see where some subcommittees are going to have some overlap. I get that. And you know what? You all are absolutely right. I just realized I'm looking at an old document with an old title for a subcommittee. Joe just said housing first. I just read off an old label they had on that committee.
I don't think the charge of the subcommittee changed. I think they just changed their name, right?
Did they? Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
I think of it as kind of a refocus, though. That if that's what you're changing the name of the committee, you don't want it just to be about permanent supportive housing. Let's talk about that housing first framework and how that gets the root of a homelessness issue, gets people into that continuum and helps keep people in housing too.
Yeah. Back to my question. What is it that we're taking to the commission?
Frustration.
I mean, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that I kind of capture it. Do we want to have, because I think there are two things, right? It's like, do we want to take anything formal back to the commission and ask for a vote, or, I don't even know how this works exactly, but I think you know what I'm saying, versus just my summary of what we talked about, because clearly my summary, if I were doing it really quick, I'd just say frustration, right? But I mean, yeah. My point, I will certainly relay the fact that we're frustrated about kind of how things are working out, et cetera. But so 2 levels, is there something formal that we want to take back to the full commission, or is it more the summary that I give every time? Vicki, go ahead.
Well, I just wondered, I know you've reported on us wanting a study, but why couldn't we ask for a vote, or was it voted on? I don't recall. So that, oh, okay, go ahead.
I'll just answer that real quick since you put that. So basically where it got to is, instead of asking specifically, okay, at this time, please vote on whether or not to have a study, where it landed was, I think, based on people's comments and kind of where we were, it was like, oh, well, we as a full commission need to talk about this. What does it mean? What would a study look like? Is a study even the right thing? So I think all we're asking for at this point is a conversation potentially leading to some sort of more formal vote from the commission.
Oh, that's right. I think, didn't you ask for it to be an agenda topic maybe or something? Yeah. Which hasn't happened. I also, this is maybe tangential, but I really also would like to see a discussion or a presentation about universal access, because I keep coming back to access issues. And maybe I suggested that privately, I don't remember, Jay. The other thing, just dealing with frustration, I can pull the emails, but a while ago, I had just made a suggestion through email, and maybe Ernesto was on them, I'm not sure, but definitely Anna and Liz. So one thing I suggested is, I'm having difficulty at the commission meetings with and some of it I think is perhaps my lack of knowledge, because I know my own area disability, and of course the commission is much broader than that, but there are lots of updates and presentations, and I find myself, I keep going back to like when we were setting goals and sort of defining what the commission was about and what the goals were, and trying to cross-reference where everything fits. And so I had suggested privately, at least to Liz and Anna, about the way we do our board meetings. Like, my reports always tie into our strategic goals. If I'm reporting on something, it's cross-referenced with that goal, which is what I keep trying to do with the information and reports we're getting at commission meetings. And I'm finding it hard to tie everything together. And in those emails, they were very supportive and thought it was possibly a good idea, I think, but then nothing ever happened with it. And I just mention it because I really am struggling to understand kind of the big picture of what we're doing. I'm really opposed to being window dressing, and I feel like that's somewhat what we are, because there isn't a lot of progress. And I think when that was brought up before, some members of the commission were offended by that. But maybe there is progress, and it's hard to see. And that's why I think it's really important to tie things into goals and to be able to actually track the outcomes. And I feel like it's a bit scattered, and I'll admit that may be me and my own disability issues. So if others don't feel that way, I can own that. But I also think, though, in general, in terms of doing like community organizing and working in social justice, we get burned out very easily. And in a lot of the work that we do, isn't tangible. And so it's really important to know, what outcomes we expect and how to track them, so that we can, relate those back to the goals and show that progress, and then celebrate those successes. Otherwise, I think we end up where we are now, with feeling frustrated. So I'm sorry, that was a lot of just feelings and not real suggestions, but
Vicki,
yeah.
what you just said is like right in line with everything we've been talking about today. I mean, I would say, like, I do really like, though, you bringing up something specific, actually, that I think is in line with, us talking about our frustration and all the stuff you just said, is, if we are going to have a presentation, which most of us here today were like, we're kind of tired of these presentations, but, simply just tying them back into some of the goals and the mission of what we're supposed to be doing, how it relates, and then, throwing some measuring some something in there is a really great idea. So I jotted that down, but I mean, you really were right on target with most everything we've been talking about today. So I think we're all on the same page here.
Yeah, to maybe add on that to a little bit, there was something that you mentioned before in the meeting, Jay, that I've made notes. I got my notes in front of me, and I kind of took it away to try to add some responsibility to myself. And that was, you mentioned action items. So I have that, I see that in my notes now. And I've tried to make sure this note is up every time we have a meeting, so that, what am I going to do, or what have I done to move forward towards an action item? Now, I'm not going to, I probably failed, to be honest with you, because I can't think of one to bring up. But I'm trying to be much more focused on, okay, yeah, all right, we're here, we exist. I should contribute. What am I going to do? What are we going to do? I don't have an answer for you, but I'm looking at it. And I've been looking at it from the last meeting and to this meeting, and I could use help from you all.
Well, I mean, honestly, Mike, I really appreciate that. But I think we have brought a major action item to the full commission, and we're just frustrated because it's not been taken up, right? I mean, we've talked a lot about this and asked for this conversation about a study. So, you know, I feel like today was our necessary kind of like, let's vent and talk about some reasons that we're, you know, kind of unhappy with the commission, which I think is great. I think it helps to focus our minds. But I do think that, you know, if our agenda item had been discussed 2 meetings ago as it was originally supposed to have happened, I think we'd all be in a different place, because, you know, that again, the action item we've got on the table is a pretty major one. So I definitely appreciate it. I kind of don't feel like, at least from my perspective today, I can't imagine what other major action item we could bring up. I mean, we're still waiting on the main one that we brought up to be acted upon. So I definitely feel you, but I'm like, we've done that. We're there. We've got our action item.
Okay, I'm just trying to figure out what else can I do?
Yeah. It's a good question. That's a good question. Go ahead, Joe.
I know I harp on tenant protection a lot, but if I was a member of the CHD, I would want to have the CHD ask mayor and council probably to have staff review what tenant protections are in effect in other cities around the country and what we think the most impactful are, and make up a suite of what the best ones, what the best possible ones are. And here are the ones that we can enact on our own. Here are the ones that there are impediments to already, state preemptions, et cetera. If you're asking for action, again, I don't know what subcommittee that fits on, but like, I'm just riffing here. I would love to see that kind of a study. And I'm not sure if HC has the capacity to say, hey, here are the things that we know about. And, you know, good cause eviction is not possible in Arizona because of this. And we cannot limit the number of application fees. That one blew my mind. We can't limit the number or amount of application fees for rentals, because I can't even remember what the because was on that one, but it's preempted at the state level. Oh, it falls under rent control, I guess, was the legal opinion on that. And that blows my mind. But like, I'd like to say, I'd like to see, hey, this is something other places have found really effective. We can't do it because of this. If you want that, then that needs to be a lobbying issue to the state legislature. Here's stuff we can pass, like source of income protection. Here's something the county could do, like right to counsel. I'd love to see something like that. Again, I don't know if HCD has the capacity to do a survey like that, but
maybe
yeah,
even some guidance from HCD about things that are doable. I mean, maybe that feel more actionable, like, you know, from the Housing Commission folks. Like, I like the direction you're going in, Joe, and like just some direction about what can we bite off, some small chunks, you know, so that we feel like we're making movement. And you're very knowledgeable about a lot of the laws and procedures, and I think most of us maybe are not. And so some guidance would be really nice about things that we could, smaller things that we could take on, right? Because we bring things up and it's like, nope, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. What can we do?
Well, I want to take on the can do something. Okay, there's no can't do. The question is whether you've got a speed bump or a brick wall in front of you, right? And there's brick wall ones like rent control. And you say, all right, I want it on the I want it on the list. I want it on the list and say, hey, this is something that we think would make a huge impact. It's also a huge lift. There are major forces against it. We would need changes at the state level that are really tough to do. But this is something that's a recommended procedure, even if it's a huge lift. Now, we've also got the ones that are low hanging fruit. Here's right to counsel, here's source of income protection, stuff like that. So we've got, and the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, I guess to its credit, when they were voting on suggestions for that they wanted to advance, said, hey, we want to put them all on here, and then what's the big impact, low effort ones? What really is the low hanging fruit that's still good fruit? And yeah, we can have those as part of it, but I also want to say, what are the big lifts that are big impact ones too? And in the long, here's the thing about, those are long-term efforts, right? But you never get anywhere in long-term efforts unless you start. And we keep refusing to start.
Right. Yeah, I don't think we should limit our hopes and our goals just because the state legislature at this moment says, rent control's off the table, or, inclusionary zoning is illegal. I mean, that doesn't mean we shouldn't recommend that they be done, right? I mean, mayor and council will make their own decision and, not pass things, I think, that are against state law. But I totally agree. I would also say, to you guys' point about, what protections are in place in other cities and things of that nature. I'm like, that all falls under an equity analysis, right? I mean, if you look at the state of renting in Tucson and you look at, tenant protections and what's causing housing instability and who's being affected by it, all of those things I think come up under solutions that you would find. So I'm not saying like I won't bring that up, but I think that that is the exact type of thing and the exact reason why we need an equity study. It's to pinpoint all of those things. Here are the problems, here are the inequities in Tucson, here are action items that can address those inequities. And I think, the tenant protections is a piece of that puzzle and, one of many pieces. So I'll definitely bring that up as a separate item to the full commission, but I do think it is something that like is just going along with all the things we're saying. Like, we need to study this stuff. We need information. We need a baseline, and we need some action items, right? Back to the whole, what's the action? So, in the interest of time, you guys, I have 2:16, and again, I've got my notes on what we've talked about. I will bring up to the full commission again this idea of asking what tenant protections are in place in other communities that could potentially be brought to Tucson. And, we're going to have a full discussion at this next meeting about this equity study. So I think, that's a great place for that to be brought up as well. And I obviously will express our frustration, the fact that we don't like so many presentations, and some of the other stuff I have jotted down. Is there anything else specifically that we need to discuss, or that you want me to specifically highlight? I mean, also, y'all, when I give the summary of our subcommittee, please, if anybody else either wants to do it or wants to do it with me, I am more than happy to share that role. I don't feel any need to do it myself. I'm happy to do it if you guys want me to, but don't ever feel like you can't jump in and be like, Jay forgot about this major thing that we talked about. So perfectly happy with that. So anyway, I'm just kind of trying to get us to a wrap up point. Obviously, we don't need to totally wrap up at this point, but just again, want to kind of check in and see where we are.
Jay, I was just going to say with the presentations, I do feel like the meetings are presentation heavy.
Yeah.
And I often wonder what my purpose is in being there. And not that I would just say, I appreciate getting good information. But I don't think it's even necessarily a conscious thing, but I think this happens a lot with commissions and committees, that presentations are scheduled because it's the easy thing to do, to fill an agenda.
Yep.
And not that it's not good information, but is a presentation during a commission meeting the best way to transmit that information? I find myself most of the time is thinking like, why didn't you just email this to me? And I know you all know this. I just want to note it because if that would come up, it's like, yeah, it might be good information you're passing on, but I don't know, just is that the right way? I just feel like when you pass on information, you have to gauge, who your audience is and what is the right format. And then what is the best use of time for commission meetings and subcommittees. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah. Again, we are all on the same page with you there. We certainly touched on that, and I'll bring that up in my summary for sure.
I just wanted to thank you, Joe, for getting us back to, just because it's hard, we shouldn't do it. I need that reminder, right? I don't do this work because it's easy. I haven't worked at our family services for 20 years because it's super easy, and you know, and the impact is enormous, or that we don't take steps back all the time. So I appreciate that. I think it's a good reminder. I also think, just for my own emotional well-being, that I need some things that I can tick off, right? That are easier, that makes me feel like my time being spent is worth it, right? Because I'll hang in there for the big fights, the brick walls. I'll hang in, but I also need some small wins. I don't know if folks can relate to that sentiment, but.
No, but I did kind of understand what Joe, when he was talking about the speed bumps and the brick walls. I did kind of dig that, Joe, because, you know, I can get ugly. I am willing to go through that brick wall, man. I'm willing to knock that down, and I'll be ugly about it, and I won't care. I hear you. If that, you know, but am I adding more negative to the goal is my biggest concern. But yeah, if there's a way to knock down that wall or go through that brick wall, Joe, just give me a handle.
Thanks, Laurie, and thanks, Mike. And I'll tell you, my revelation on a lot of this was, you know, realizing, especially when we're in the context of housing segregation, how these issues have been constructed over decades and generations. And even locally, talking to people who talk to John Burr, Chris Gantz, or somebody who's been involved with local zoning for 20 years, right? They will tell you that this is not a quick fight. These fights are not easy. These issues have been built over generations, and it's going to take a similar amount of time to tear them down. And like Laurie says, that is tough. It is tough to plant a tree whose fruit you will never see. But the fruit doesn't ever get here unless you plant the tree. So yeah, you know, I think there's definitely, like I was talking about the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, there's definitely a balance to be had between stuff that's going to get here and stuff that you can go, yeah, you know, maybe it's a small advance, but you get a win out of it, and stuff that's just gonna you recommend, and you know it's not quick and easy, but it's worth the fight.
I mean, that seems like a pretty good place to move to our next agenda item and move us towards adjournment. What do you guys think? All right.
I'm with you.
All right. So number 4 is call to the audience. This is when any member of the public may address the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development. Due to time constraints, the total time allocated for this is 15 minutes. Individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. Due to open meeting law, Commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Items brought up by the public may be considered as an agenda item for a future meeting. Call to the audience. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to speak today in this particular time slot that hasn't spoken already? Okay, seeing none, I will move to agenda item number 5, which are next steps. Our next meeting says June 30th, but I guess that's probably not accurate. I don't know. Ernesto, do you know when our next meeting is? Next segregation subcommittee meeting?
No, let me check the calendar, because yeah, that June is not correct.
While he's checking.
July 28th.
What's that say again?
Should be July 28th, I think.
And that is correct.
Okay. So our next meeting will be Housing Segregation Subcommittee will be July 28th and at 1 p.m. I mean, do y'all want to talk about having our meeting time later for more people to attend? Would that be worth it, or what do y'all think, since that was brought up today?
Were we talking about later or earlier for folks? I wasn't sure.
Either way.
Joe, do you have a sense?
Ours is the earliest of all the subcommittee meetings. I think everything else happens at like 4 o'clock. I don't know. It's always tough for me, because if you ask, you're self-selecting a group to tell you what the best time for the meeting is. Even if you do a poll with Lori, Mike, Jay, and even if you include, Vicky's shown up for a lot of these, and I show up for a lot of these, you're polling the people that can already make the 1 p.m. meeting about whether the 1 p.m. meeting is good.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I literally don't know whether it's better to do it later, and whether you'll get you'll get more people later. And if it's inconvenient to all of you, is it worth, if it's less convenient to do it at in the evening, if it's a pain in the butt for y'all. The other thing is, I don't, the thing you absolutely don't want is something that's inconvenient for you, because then you don't make quota. And then you end up where Housing First was for 6 months, where you can't have a meeting. That was a long way of saying I have no clue, dude.
Well, why don't we do this? I mean, one of the things that we could put on our number 3, our ideas for action, equity topics, we could put as a specific topic that we want to discuss is our meeting time. Why don't we do that? That'd give us some time to think about it and maybe ask around. Ernesto, could that actually make it onto our agenda so that we don't miss it next time?
Our agenda being the full commission, or this subcommittee
Just
agenda?
our subcommittee.
Yeah. So the question is, can you put this item on your agenda?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would like to put that item on the agenda to discuss our meeting time and whether or not we want to change it.
Okay.
Any other items for future meetings? Again, 3A seems to capture everything we want to talk about so far. And obviously having the meeting time as an agenda item will help us to remember to actually talk about it next time. Is there anything else that we want for a future meeting? Okay.
I don't want to, think about everything we talked about again.
Yeah. Well, and, I think hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about, since the item that we're wanting the full commission to take up will be taken up at the next meeting, our study. So we'll have a lot to talk about. And I don't think we necessarily need another item on the agenda to be able to talk about that. So it sounds like we're good for our agenda. And with that, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
you.
See y'all soon.
See you.